I am nervous for this one. Hello everybody, Nicky Marra here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you've all had a fabulous week and are ready for yet another interesting ranking list. Now, as you may know if you saw my video a couple of weeks ago, we discussed my 15 favorite Disney characters of all time. I got to look back and happily reminisce over some of my absolute favorite characters, including Princess Ariel from The Little Mermaid, Maleficent, the Mistress of All Evil from Sleeping Beauty, and Wendy Darling, the absolutely iconic dreamer from Peter Pan. And in today's video, I don't get to talk about any of those. As over the past few weeks, I have seen a couple of comments pop up that say, Nicky Marra, we have heard your 15 favorite Disney characters, but what about your 15 least favorite characters? Well, you all have asked, and I have put together a list. And, it's something. Now, before we go any further, I do want to put this section of the video right here. I have specifically called this video ranking my 15 least favorite Disney characters because this entire video is just my personal opinion. What I think is so beautiful about the iconic canon of Disney characters is that each one of us can relate to something entirely different. For example, I'm absolutely certain that one of the 15 characters on my ranking of favorite Disney characters list could have possibly appeared on your least favorites list. By placing characters in this ranking list, I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that they are bad characters. In fact, I think some of them are entirely complex and interesting, just not for me personally. These are really just the characters that I personally don't gravitate towards for one reason or another, and we're gonna get into it. But believe me when I say we're gonna do all of this with a positive twist. So no worries, we're not gonna be bad talking any characters on today's list. Now keep in mind for today's ranking list that my favorite character is really gonna be all the way down at the bottom at number 15, and as we work our way up, they become less and less liked by me. So number 1 is for sure on today's ranking list going to be my least favorite Disney character. That one, you're gonna have to wait and see about that one. But if you're new to the channel, hi, my name's Nicky Marra and I'm a Disney content creator. I got my start over on TikTok, but I've joined the YouTube community and have been loving making long-form videos for you guys, of which I have brand new videos coming out every single Friday at 5 p.m. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe down below so that way you never miss out on any future magic from me. And likewise, if you'd like to find me on any of my other social medias, my handle is @NickyMarra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat for even more magic. Now, really quick, before we jump into our ranking list, I do have some brief disclaimers, conditions, and then talking points we're going to be sure to touch on for each character on today's list. But as always, if you would just like to jump right into our ranking video today, then you can head right to this timestamp. First and foremost, for our disclaimers, I am not associated with the Walt Disney Company and therefore I do not speak for the brand or the company, and any and all opinions in this video are just my own and do not reflect those of the brand or the company. But secondly, I welcome any and all opinions surrounding these Disney characters down in my comment section. Like I said, everybody's favorites and least favorites list is going to look entirely different and you might completely disagree with my list today, and that is incredible. So if you happen to agree with one of the characters that is on my list, make sure to let me know. But also, if I rank a character on today's list that you really, really love, make sure to give them some love down in the comment section. I always love getting to hear all of your differing opinions on my personal ranking of all of these wonderful Disney categories. So please, please, please make sure to leave all of your thoughts down below because everybody's voice here matters. But thirdly, for the disclaimers, I do want to give a brief spoiler warning for all of the Disney movies and Disney characters we are going to be talking about in today's video. As a part of the talking points, we are going to be going into how the characters affect the plot of their movie. And so if you don't want a specific Disney movie spoiled for you, then I just recommend jumping on up to the next number on today's list. But next, friends, for the conditions for today's list. These characters must either come from a full-length animated Disney feature or a full-length Pixar animated feature. And as you saw from the title, we are only going to be ranking 15 of my least favorite Disney characters today. But besides that, that's pretty much it for the conditions. They just have to be from one of those 2 Disney studios and has to be in my bottom 15. But yes, friends, with all of those disclaimers and conditions out of the way, very quickly, let's jump into our talking points we're going to be sure to touch on for each individual character. After first identifying the Disney character, we are then going to discuss which Disney animated film they can be found in. Secondly, we're going to go into a physical description of the character, describing what they look like in design. Thirdly, we're going to be talking about their personality, as in what the character is like emotionally. Fourth, we're going to be talking about why the character falls on today's list, meaning I will be talking about the specific reasons why I don't gravitate towards the characters and why they do fall into my bottom 15 favorite Disney characters of all time. But like I said, we are going to keep it positive, so the 5th talking point we're going to be sure to touch on for each character is we are going to discuss one very positive trait about that character. Because in ranking these characters on this list, I am absolutely in no way, shape, or form saying that there is nothing good about these characters. I very much think there is a lot of good coming from the fact that they exist, as they can either teach us a very good lesson or they can amplify the story that they are found in. However, that's just not my personal opinion that they do. But with all of that, friends, I believe it is finally time to jump into our ranking list for today. Oh, send me some good vibes on this one. If you are ready for today's video, then sit back, relax, grab yourself a snack and a drink, and let's rank my 15 least favorite Disney characters of all time. We are starting today's list all the way down at the bottom at number 15, who is Milo Thatch. Now hang on, before you get mad at me. There's a reason why he's here. I'll get into it. Now, Milo, of course, comes from the Disney animated film Atlantis: The Lost Empire. As for a physical description of the character, he is a rather slender gentleman with messy hair and a rather nervous demeanor. As for his personality, he is intelligent, awkward, passionate, but still determined. Now, as for the reason why he ranks on my 15 least favorite Disney characters list, in all honesty, I don't get a whole lot of charisma from this character as the lead of his animated Disney movie. When I watch Atlantis: The Last Empire, I very much am immediately gravitating towards other characters in the film, such as Empress Kido, who I think is a wonderful Disney character. However, the fact of the movie is that we spend significantly more time with Milo in this film, and maybe it's just me, but I just personally don't gravitate towards him. I don't really find him that interesting of a character. And when I think of Disney heroes or the leading male Disney characters in animated films, I can think of a ton that are significantly more interesting in my personal opinion. Now, that is not saying in any way, shape, or form that he's a bad character, because he does do a lot of good things in his animated film, and I do think his heart is absolutely in the right place. And as for Milo's best quality in his animated film, that would be his belief in Atlantis and his compassion, which ultimately saves the civilization. So yes, even though he lands on my 15 least favorite Disney characters of all time, this is a character immediately that I don't dislike at all. I'm just not personally gravitated towards him, and I'm not inclined to really rank him high on any ranking lists that he fits the category of. Again, he's totally fine as a character, just not one of my personal favorites. But yes, friends, next we're going to move on up to number 14 on my list. Again, just one step worse than Mr. Milo. At number 14 is Jim Hawkins. Yes, you've heard me talk about him many a times on the channel, and he's always at a low ranking point, and so let's talk about why he's always low for me. Now, Jim Hawkins comes from the 2002 Disney animated film, Treasure Planet. And as for a physical description, he is a teenage boy with a ponytail, brown hair, and a rather futuristic pirate look. As for his personality, he is rather rebellious. Likewise, he is sullen, intelligent, but emotionally vulnerable. And so what ranks him in my 15 least favorite Disney characters of all time? Well, in my personal opinion, I think he is a bit too, moody and angst driven. Jim Hawkins is very much a character who upon first glance can seem like he is very uninterested in things that are happening around him, as after we learn at the beginning of his film the plot about his father leaving, he really falls into this negative view of the world, and that's just something that I personally don't relate with. I personally have always been the kind of person to try to find the positive in any and all situations, so his moodiness and angstiness in his film just isn't, honestly, personality traits that I personally align myself with. Although granted, I can absolutely see how this one is a relatable Disney character. Likewise, the other reason why he ranks on today's list is I actually do feel for him quite a bit and do like his character arc all the way up until he ends up aging up in his film. We see him when he's very young, and I do very much like him as the younger version of himself, but it's when he grows up into his teenage years and begins that isolatedness and negative worldview that I personally don't really see a whole lot of myself in. But as for the best quality for Mr. Jim Hawkins in his Disney animated film, his journey is indeed a compelling arc of growth, proving both his heroism and his loyalty. Again, for being a main hero in a Disney animated film, he's nowhere near a bad character, just not one that I personally gravitate towards, and seeing as he ranked just a little bit above Milo, I'm a little bit less drawn to him than Milo. So, yeah, that's why Jim Hawkins is gonna go on my ranking of 15 least favorite Disney characters. But again, I do totally get why a lot of people do like him. But with that, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 13 on my list. We're gonna visit some comedic side relief. At number 13 is the character Hugo. Yes, friends, Hugo the Gargoyle, who can be found in the 1996 Disney animated film, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. As for a physical description of the character, he is a short, round stone gargoyle with an almost jester-like appearance. As for his personality, he is comedic relief. He's rather crude in his animated film, and he's also very mischievous and very loud. But as for the reason he ranks in my 15 least favorite Disney characters, well, honestly, I think there is a really big tone problem when including his character in the main plot of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. What I mean by that is Hunchback as a film is very grand, it is very artistic, the music is out of this world, so bombastic and beautiful, and the plot is very dark. All of the things that I love about The Hunchback of Notre Dame. But when we include Hugo in the mix, he almost seems like this one character that just doesn't fit into the bigger puzzle. Now, granted, he is a ray of comedy and of sunshine in this film, as he has this very lighthearted energy, but it almost feels like it's forced into the film, as opposed to letting him have his own space in the film. And so when talking about this film overall, really the only thing I don't enjoy about it is the character Hugo, which makes me feel really bad, because in all honesty, in character design, he is really cute. Like, if you were to just look at a picture of him, he is pretty cute, and I can totally see why people would gravitate towards him, especially those who have a very similar form of comedy to Hugo, but I think my comedy is just a little bit too different from Hugo for me to gravitate towards him within this entire image of a Disney animated film. But as for Hugo's best quality within his Disney animated film, he encourages Quasimodo to believe in himself and to take action. Seeing as Hugo is a part of a very iconic trio in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he very much fits in with the other two who are always there to emotionally support Quasimodo, and so we can't get too terribly mad at him, I guess. And speaking of trios, if you haven't already seen it, I do have a full ranking of Disney trios, which I can link up above for you in case you are interested. So yes, again, I don't think Hugo's a bad character. I think he's very cute in character design. I just think he has a tiny little bit of a tone problem in his animated film. And yeah, that's kind of why he ranks on my list, but I don't dislike him, really. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 12 on my list, the first villain of today's list. At number 12 is Bellwether. Now, Bellwether, of course, can be seen in the 2016 Disney animated film, Zootopia. And as for a physical description of this mayor of Zootopia, she is a small woolly sheep with glasses and a very cute voice. And as for her personality, well, at the beginning and throughout the majority of this animated film, she is rather meek and shy and has a rather sweet demeanor. However, at the very end, she serves as a twist villain, showing up instead as cunning, bitter, and power-hungry. And as for the reason why she ranks on my 15 least favorite characters, I think that twist villains in general are not a bad archetype for the Disney company. I really do think it was interesting with like Hans. I also very much did like Yokai in Big Hero 6, who was also a twist villain of sorts. But in my personal opinion, Bellwether just didn't seem like a twist villain that was successful in the runtime of her animated film. Don't get me wrong, the twist was definitely there. This one did catch me off guard the first time that I watched the animated film. And when it finally is revealed, I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But simultaneously, I thought to myself, I don't really know if I get that or if I buy that from this animated film. In my personal opinion, Zootopia takes on a lot of social justice issues in its animated film, and I almost don't even really know if we needed a specific villain rather than just like the idea of discrimination all in of its own. I almost think that could have been a more poignant message in a Disney movie rather than having a twist villain that seems a little bit strange. And again, this twist villain could just seem strange to me because we're going very off of archetype, where this very small, cute, seemingly sweet animal finally turns around and is super evil. But in a way, because this character is quite literally in size smaller than the main characters in her animated film, she almost doesn't seem like that much of a threat. And so I don't necessarily dislike the character of Bellwether, I just think her mechanics within her animated film are a little bit strange and just feel a little bit off. Again, not saying she's a bad character, not saying she's a bad villain, she just seems a little bit off to me personally. But as for the best quality about Bellwether in her animated film, well, she challenges assumptions of both appearance and power. One thing I will say about this little animated lamb is that she will have you second-guessing all of your relationships with other people coming out of this animated film, as she very much does not fit the generalized archetype. And while that can definitely be a good thing, it just personally didn't work for me. But I will say, she is cute in design. But next, friends, we're going to move on up to number 11 on my list. And while we're going to stick with the villain characters, we're going to introduce our first Pixar character. At number 11 is the character Hopper. Now, Hopper, of course, can be seen in the 1998 Pixar animated film, A Bug's Life. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a rather large and intimidating grasshopper with rather rough features and a pretty scarred appearance. As for his personality traits, he is very domineering, as well as violent and manipulative. But as for why this character falls in my 15 least favorite of all time, I will be completely honest when I say I am not super in love with this character design. I personally think a lot of the other characters in A Bug's Life, such as Flick, Princess Ada, Princess Dot, all have really interesting character designs, but Hopper, for being a villain, is kind of just a plain, regular grasshopper. Which, don't get me wrong, can definitely work for his animated film, especially since he brings into the picture a lot of, like, really scary themes, such as embodying oppressive tyranny with little redemption. But I think for a character as evil as him, he could have had a little bit of something better for his character design. Likewise, I will also say that I don't necessarily think a lot of his motives in his animated film are super complex. The themes that he takes on definitely are, as we just discussed, but as for where they come from, that doesn't really have a complex and concrete footing. I guess what I'm saying is I don't really understand why he thinks the way that he does in his animated film when he's pretty much appeared very powerful for the entire film. That could definitely stem from fear of losing power, but that just seems like a simple answer to me. And I much prefer the Disney villains who seem like they have a lot more complex backstory, even if it's not given to us right up front. I guess what I'm saying is I just can't find his complex villain origin story. And you know what, that's okay. We all gravitate towards something different, so I'm sure there's somebody out there who absolutely loves Hopper's arc and thinks he's one of the best Disney animated villains, and I absolutely think you should think that way. And if you think that way, then please let me know all of your thoughts on Mr. Hopper down in the comment section. I'm very curious. But as for Hopper's best quality in his original animated film, his cruelty unites the ants to rise up against him, which pushes them towards a revolution. So even though he may not be one of my favorite Disney characters, he definitely does have an important role in his animated film, which is to motivate all of our heroes in order to revolt against the grasshoppers. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Hopper. I definitely don't think he's a bad character. Again, just not one that I personally gravitate towards. But with that, friends, we have reached number 10 and the top 10, I guess you could say bottom 10 of today's ranking list. And if you have any guesses as to who is gonna fall in my bottom 10 least favorite Disney characters of all time, take your guesses down in the comments now. I'm excited to see if you can guess any of them before I actually name them. Okay, but I'm stalling. We gotta get into the top 10. Oof, I'm nervous. But that, friends, we're moving down to number 10 on my list. At number 10 is Randall Boggs. I know. I give a lot of heat to Monsters, Inc., but he goes at number 10. Now, as you said, Randall Boggs, of course, comes from Monsters, Inc., which was the Pixar film released in the year 2001. And as for a physical description of the character, he is a slender, chameleon-like monster with multiple legs and the ability to turn invisible. As for his personality, he is sneaky, ambitious, envious, and quite cruel. But as for the reason why he falls on today's list of my 15 least favorite Disney characters, well, while his jealousy and villainous tactics do make him easy to despise right off the bat, I honestly think his character design is kinda creepy. I know for a fact that I've said this before, but me in real life, I am deathly afraid of snakes, and I do not like the way that they move, and they just like creep me out to the absolute max. And for some reason, even though Randall Boggs has legs, I am like constantly reminded of them whenever I see him moving around. And the fact that he can turn invisible and just like appear out of nowhere also is like super unsettling and creepy to me. So I guess you could say the reason why he falls in my least favorite characters is because he's so creepy in design, and like his design actually creeps me out, but he falls down there because I don't enjoy it, because I actually do find him icky. So yes, while he's not a bad villain by any means, and he serves a very good purpose in his animated film, I just really have a hard time like watching his animation on screen because I don't know, he's just a little too creepy for me, and the animators did a little bit too good of a job, I guess you could say, on this character, because this is one of the only monsters in Monsters, Inc. that really actually creeps me out. Yeah, and because of all of that, I find it difficult to enjoy his presence in the animated film, where normally a lot of other Disney villains, I love to hate them. I don't really love seeing Randall on screen because I want him to go away. But as for his best quality in his animated film, Randall does serve as a very compelling villain, and he does a really successful job in his film at driving the plot's conflict forward. He creates a real threat for Mike and Sully in their animated film, and so realistically, he is a very successful villain. I guess I just wish he looked like anything else other than what he actually does. And again, that's just because he creeps me out personally, but he might be one of your favorite characters, to which I say, I get it, but like, I don't. But with that, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 9 on my list. We're gonna be talking about another Pixar character. At number 9 is Spot. Now, Spot, you might recall, comes from the 2015 Pixar animated film, The Good Dinosaur. As for a physical description of the character, he is a rather small human boy with wild hair, a lot of dirt all over his skin, and rather primitive clothing. As for his personality, he is quite animalistic in his animated film, but also brave, and he's also reasonably expressive in his animated film. But as for why this character ranks on today's ranking list in my bottom 15 favorites, I personally find this character in this animated film to be extremely uncanny. When I think of this film's 2 animated protagonists, we have Arlo and Spot. Arlo is the cute little dinosaur, and he is extremely verbal, extremely smart, and he is the decision maker, and he is the one that propels a lot of the plot forward in this film. And then Spot, who is the human character, is kind of like the almost animal stand-in. He's very primitive, he doesn't speak in his film, and he causes a lot of setbacks for Arlo in his film as well. I will also say that this film ranks very low on all of the ranking lists that I talk about, specifically because of one scene in particular, which is the berry scene. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, take my word for it, live in ignorant bliss. But yeah, in my opinion, I think these 2 animated protagonists could have been a little bit more balanced, where Spot actually helped Arlo on his journey rather than just hindering him the entire time. And I know technically he doesn't, but like, that's realistically what I remember coming out of this animated film every single time I watch it. And with a slight fear of sounding cruel, it really just seems like throughout this film that Spot is sort of like the heavy baggage that Arlo needs to lug along with him on his journey. And that makes me really sad to say, because Spot is really cute in character design, but yeah, I don't know what it is about him. There's something that I just can't get my head around, and I wish I could, but yeah, Spot is not the character for me. But as for his best quality in his animated film, because he is definitely not all bad, I will say he is fiercely loyal to Arlo. He sticks with him throughout the whole animated film. Likewise, in this film, he also does represent the emotional connection without the need of words, which I also do think is a very interesting point, especially when delving into an animated film that takes place in prehistoric times, where language wouldn't have necessarily been around, but he is still able to access some emotion in this film. He's very expressive with his facial expressions and his eyes, so that's gonna be his positive. But I still really don't gravitate towards this character, which again does kind of make me sad. I wish I did have more positive things to say about this character, but much like the rest of his animated film, this one is just not one that personally gravitates with me, and so that's why he earns his ranking on today's list. With that, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 8 on my list. Yet another Pixar character. I promise the rest of them aren't Pixar characters, but there were a fair few. At number 8 is Big Baby. Now, this is another one that kind of makes me feel bad because it's a younger character. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. Now, Big Baby, of course, can be seen in the 2010 Pixar animated film, Toy Story 3. And as for a physical description of this character, Big Baby is an oversized baby doll with a cracked eye and a rather intimidating glare. As for his personality, he is silent throughout his film, and also acts in a very childlike manner. And while it does seem like throughout his film he is emotionally stunted, he is quite loyal to whichever side he seems to be on. But as for the reason why this character ranks so low on my list today, in my personal opinion, there is such a level of like uncanny valley with Big Baby that honestly kind of creeps me out. Now, I have said before many times on the channel that I am a really big fan of horror movies. Like, I love the scary movies. I love to be scared. I love Halloween time. I love going to the haunted walkthroughs. There really isn't a whole lot that creeps me out. However, for being in the context of this animated film, Big Baby is just really off-putting to me for some reason. And I will say, I don't think it's the fact that he is a archetype of creepy doll, especially because in Toy Story 4, the characters Gabby Gabby and all of the ventriloquist dolls don't creep me out nearly as much as Big Baby. I honestly don't know what the reason is. There is just something in me watching this character on screen that makes me like wince and like wanna back away from the TV a little bit. It's just uncanny valley to the max for me. I will say the other thing about him that I also find a little bit odd and don't really love about his presence in the film is that he is so quickly forgiven at the end of his animated film by the heroes, which I kind of get because he is a childlike character. But I will also say it almost feels like his loyalty switches way too quickly, and so there's also that level of uncanny where it's like, we never truly know where this baby's loyalties lie, which also I think adds to his creep factor. But Big Baby is not all bad in his film. Let's talk about his best quality in his animated film. His best quality is that eventually he redeems himself by turning on Lotso. It is very arguable that the villain defeat in this animated film is because of Big Baby. So, he is in fact the reason that Lotso's plotting is all foiled. So, there is some good to him. Still doesn't change the fact that he kinda wigs me out in this animated film. And honestly, I do feel bad because he's a little baby character and he should seem very sweet and cute, like you want to hold him, but this one is just not one that I gravitate towards, and I'm gonna leave it at that today. But next, friends, we are gonna move on up to number 7 on my list, and I feel like this one's gonna come with a big explanation. At number 7 is the character John Smith. This one is, without a doubt, I would say, the most iconic character to fall on today's list, and so I feel like I need to explain myself quite a bit with this one. Now, John Smith, of course, comes from the 1995 Disney animated film, Pocahontas. And as for a physical description of this Disney prince and hero, he is blonde-haired and blue-eyed, with a strong build and dressed in explorer gear. As for his personality, he is adventurous and confident, and while initially arrogant, he eventually becomes open-minded. But as for the reason that Mr. Johnny Smith lands on today's ranking list, and as one of my personal unfavorables, there's honestly quite a few reasons. First and foremost, it goes without saying that the animated Disney film Pocahontas is not an accurate reflection of history, meaning that when John Smith met Pocahontas, he was very much so in his late 30s, early 40s, and was nothing of the sort a romantic interest for Pocahontas. That being said, the animated character is supposed to be completely separate from the historical figure, so let's leave that behind us for now, and let's talk about the animated character. The animated character in his film is a mixed bag for a lot of different reasons. He is indeed supposed to be a hero in his animated film. However, he comes along with a lot of traits that I don't think are necessarily admirable. And what I mean by that is, when he first meets Pocahontas, a lot of the words he decides to use are quite discriminatory. Specifically, seeing that he is on her land and uses words against her and her people that are extremely unkind. Now, again, I do understand that the animated character does eventually change over, side with Pocahontas, and help lead to peace between the colonists and the indigenous people. However, I don't know. I guess the real question becomes, can a person change that quickly and that honestly? And I don't really know. I guess he can, because you know what? Disney characters typically always have the best possible outcome in their animated films, and so here's hoping that the animated character really does change that drastically in his animated film. That would make him admirable. However, what isn't is how he approaches life in the first half of this film before he meets Pocahontas. And I will also say, there are a lot of similarities at the beginning of this movie with John Smith in comparison to Ratcliffe. However, the reason why Ratcliffe won't rank on this personal list is that he's painted as a villain. Like, it's very much so, this is bad. This is a bad character, and that's made obvious to us. However, it almost seems like John Smith in the first half of his film is also included in that, like, package of heroism. And so, maybe I'm not the one to speak on this, but there's just something about him as a character that just does not rub me the right way. Again, I completely acknowledge he does a lot of heroic things in his film, much like saving Chief Powhatan's life. But still, that's kind of where my brain sits with this character, and I have a lot of complex thoughts on it, and I don't think thinking about these characters should be as complex when it comes to deciding if they are good or morally bad. But with all of that aside, let's talk about a positive quality of John Smith. His best quality in his animated film is that he learns to respect different cultures. And not only respect them, but also immerse himself in them, learning to appreciate other people who are different from himself. And doing all of this actually leads him to reject violence, unlike a lot of the other colonists in this animated film. So I will leave John Smith here at number 7 on my list, and yeah, those are all of my upfront thoughts on the character, but I understand why people would like him, and I also understand why people wouldn't, and I just personally don't gravitate towards him. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 6 on my list, and we're kind of getting into the characters that I just really don't love. Alright, at number 6 on my list is Wilbur Robinson. Now, Wilbur Robinson, of course, comes from the 2007 Disney animated film, Meet the Robinsons. And as for a physical description of the character, he is a small, rather lanky boy with glasses and spiked hair. And as for his personality, he's rather hyperactive and impulsive, but ultimately he is good-hearted and brave. But as for the reason that he ranks on my ranking list of 15 least favorite Disney characters, well, I honestly find a lot of his, over-the-top antics to be kind of irritating. Sorry. Yeah, there's just a whole lot to him in terms of his eccentricness, and I think that kind of rides the line of, like, over-the-top versus, like, realism in an animated movie, because there are a lot of hyper Disney characters in their animated films that do so in a very real way, where you can still empathize and relate to them. However, for me personally, I think Wilbur Robinson is a little bit too over the top for me to personally relate to, and yeah, to the point where I feel so bad saying this, I kind of do find him a little annoying. But again, he is not all bad in his animated film. Let's talk about his best quality. Wilbur Robinson's best quality in his animated film is that he shows growth and loyalty, in that he risks everything to see Lewis succeed. I do think his heart is definitely in the right place. Yeah, again, it's just his personality traits that are just a little bit off to me, to the point where I would see this character and say, I don't really know if I personally would get along with him. And I think that's understandable, because you can't really get along with everybody in life, right? And I just think of everybody in my personal life, Wilbur Robinson, the character, maybe is not one that I would get along with. Although I would definitely like to see more character meet and greets for him, so that way we can get into his mind a little bit more. He's not a bad character. Again, he's just not one that I personally gravitate towards. But with that, friends, we reached my top 5, and I'm not gonna lie, a lot of these are gonna have a significantly reduced description as to why I don't like them, because at this point, all of these characters are just ones that I just don't gravitate towards, don't really see any admirable qualities, and just am not drawn to them. But yes, friends, with that, we're gonna move on up to number 5 on my list. At number 5 is Lyle Tiberius Rourke. Now, Mr. Rourke also comes from Atlantis: The Lost Empire, which was released in the year 2001. As for a physical description, he is a rather muscular and gray-haired man with a chiseled jaw and a very intimidating presence. As for his personality, he is ruthless and pragmatic, as well as intelligent and greedy. But as for the reason he falls on this placement on today's list, he is just not a character that I like at all. He is, of course, the villain of his animated film. However, where again, most Disney animated villains you love to hate, I just don't like him at all. And maybe that is the point, but yeah, I just don't like him. His betrayal in his movie is seen as truly heartless. And in my personal opinion, I think he totally lacks emotional depth or any kind of redemption in his animated film. But you could argue that that makes him a very compelling villain, which, in all honesty, I probably would agree with. But as for the best quality of this animated character, he is a capable and commanding leader, and his strength does set the stakes high for Milo and his crew. So yeah, while you could say that Lyle is a very successful villain within the scope of his animated film, in my opinion, there's just not that love to hate for this Disney character. It's kind of just like pure villainy, which I honestly don't really love, and he's just not a character that I can relate to in any way, shape, or form, or get around. But again, there are definitely people out there that might think he's a fantastic villain, in which case I would say I completely understand why. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 4 on my list, another character that I do not gravitate towards. At number 4 is Lucky Jack. Now, Lucky Jack comes from the 2004 Disney animated film Home on the Range, which is also not one of my favorites. But as for a physical description of this character, I couldn't think of another word. Lucky Jack is a one-legged jackrabbit with a prosthetic wooden leg. And as for his personality, he is rather energetic, talkative, persistent, and also quite scatterbrained. And as for the reason he ends up falling on today's list, it also has to do with his personality. In the fact that, like, his hyperactive personality just, I don't want to be mean, I feel so bad being mean, but it's kind of grating over the course of the animated film, and in all honesty, he also just feels very unnecessary to the plot. He feels like a character that's stuck in for comedic relief, but I also don't necessarily find him comedic or endearing, and I don't know. I don't know. This is not a character that I like. I'm gonna be very honest, I really don't really care for this one. But as for his best quality in his animated film, because even if I don't really like him, he has to have some sort of goodness to him. He as a character is very courageous and resourceful, in that he does help the cows on their mission. But that's kind of it. Again, this is absolutely a character that I would not label as a bad character. I don't think Disney has any bad characters, truly, and I just, he gets on my nerves at times, and maybe that's the point. Yeah, I mean he is kind of cute in character design. I'm trying. I'm just trying to be nice more than anything, but we're at the bottom of the list. It's kind of hard at this point. All right, we're at the top 3. I can do this. I'm strong. I can get through this. All right, next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 3 on my list. At number 3 is Abby Mallard. Now, Abby Mallard, of course, comes from the 2005 Disney animated film Chicken Little, and as for a physical description of this character, she is a duck who wears braces as well as glasses, and she has some very messy feathers. As for her personality, she is extremely awkward and rather eccentric. However, I will say she is always supportive of her friends. But as for the reason that Miss Abby Mallard ranks on my list of my 15 least favorite Disney characters, I personally find her design and not her voice, but the way that she speaks to be quite, I'm gonna be mean, I'm sorry, irritating. Likewise, I will also say that her dialogue feels very forced in this animated film. It just feels unnatural for the character to say a lot of the things that she does, which is not the case for a lot of other animated Disney characters. They all feel so incredibly complexly written, and this character is just not one of them. And this is not to put any of the blame for my dislike of her on the voice actress Joan Cusack, because Joan Cusack also voices the character Jessie, who I really, really love. I just think the material that she was given is not my favorite, and perhaps the way that she was directed to perform the character is not one of my favorites. Yeah, in general, Abby Mallard is not one that I would consider iconic in the animated canon. Yeah, there's very, very little that I like about her. But as for her best quality in her animated film, she is a very fiercely loyal friend to Chicken Little. And I will also say she does encourage his self-worth in the film, so there definitely is some good to this character. But in my opinion, she's deserving of her placement on the list. Oh, next we're moving on up to number 2 on my list. Oh my god, okay. At number 2 is the character Zini. Now, Zini comes from the 2000 Disney animated film Dinosaur. As for a physical description of this character, he is a lemur with brown fur and a long tail and rather expressive eyes. As for his personality, he is comedic relief. He is quite flirtatious, rather fast-talking, and occasionally obnoxious. As for the reason why he lands at number 2 on my list of least favorite Disney characters, I do have to say I find his humor to be quite forced and also out of place for this animated film, especially considering this film otherwise has a very, very serious overtone to the whole thing, and much like Hugo, he seems very out of place in this animated film, but a lot more jarringly. Likewise, I will also say, and I don't necessarily dock this against the character, but actually I don't even dock it against the animation team, but this film's animation does look rough as of today's standards in 2025, and that is understandable 100%, because we all had to start somewhere, and you know, who am I to say anything about that? But I will also say I think this character's design with the animation style, not one of my favorites. Entering into Uncanny Valley, and I just don't love this character. But as for his best quality in his animated film, well, that would be the fact that he is loyal to his family and to Aladar. And I will say he does provide needed support in a very dark film. It goes without saying that these characters face some very difficult times, and I guess we have to say that Zini, he has a place in his animated film. Unfortunately for some, unfortunately for others. And so yes, while some may find this character very endearing and a ray of hope in his animated film, that is not my personal view of the character. I am not a big fan, and he, once again, is very deserving of this place on my personal list. But with that, friends, we have reached number 1 on my list of my least favorite Disney characters. Have you possibly guessed who it could be? Well, yes, friends. At number 1 on my list of least favorite Disney characters, and taking the place of my least favorite Disney character of all times, is John Silver. Now, John Silver comes from the 2002 Disney animated film, Treasure Planet. As for a physical description of the character, he is a cyborg with a humanoid upper body and mechanical limbs, including a robotic arm and a leg and a mechanical eye. As for his personality, he is charismatic, but also cunning and manipulative, and has a very deep, complex, buried sense of morality, with apparently fatherly affection for Jim also in there somewhere. But as for the reason why he ranks at number 1 on my list of least favorite Disney characters, let's get into it. I personally find this character's morally gray status to be quite jarring. I personally find his dual purpose in his movie as villain and mentor to our hero as very confusing and very inconsistent. Likewise, the fact that he also gets a hero's ending after doing a lot of really bad things in his animated film does not feel justified, does not feel warranted for this character. It almost seems like he is a villain who acts as a villain and is rewarded for it at the end of the film. And you know what? In a lot of ways, maybe my problem with this character is the story and not so much the character, but I will also say there's not a whole lot about this character that I like either. I think his design for being futuristic is, again, jarring. I don't know. There's something so off about him, in my personal opinion, that I just find him entirely like somebody that I would try to avoid in my everyday life. And again, that might be the point of the character, but that not really a big fan. But as for his best quality, because even my least favorite Disney character of all time has to have a good quality in him, his best quality, I guess you could say, would be his fatherly bond with Jim, as he seemingly is an inspiration for Jim to go on his path and to grow. And ultimately, he does choose Jim over the treasure in the end, and so that is a good quality. However, in my opinion, the ends do not justify the means. Yeah, I can't even really put into fully formed words as to why I don't like this character. Do you know when you just meet somebody in real life and they just rub you the wrong way and they give you that energy? John Silver gives me that energy where I'm just no thanks, just take a few steps back. I'm good. But again, that is just my personal opinion, and there could absolutely be many viewers out there who very much love the moral complexity of this character and really gravitate towards him, and I think that's wonderful, and that is what makes us all different. And that's honestly a big point of why I love Disney so much, is that we all truly gravitate towards something different. However, John Silver is my least favorite Disney character, and he ranks at number 1 on today's list. But with that, friends, we have talked about 15 of my least favorite Disney characters of all time. First of all, I'm so sorry. I hope that video wasn't too negative for you, but I do want to say thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you're looking for any more videos that are a lot more positive, I'll put my ranking playlist up above. Every other video is, I promise, like, significantly more talking about the positive of the characters. But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below so that way you never miss out on any future magic from me. And likewise, if you would like to find me on any of my other social medias, my handle is @NickyMarra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat for even more magic. Yes, I want to thank you again all so much for watching, and this video truly was born out of multiple comments that I received across multiple videos of so many of you wondering which Disney characters were some of my least favorites, and I hope today's video was interesting. I know these characters aren't necessarily some of the most beloved, but hopefully I didn't make too many of you mad out there in YouTube land. Again, I more than welcome you to leave all of your thoughts down in the comments. I can't wait to hear about all of your least favorite Disney characters, and also your thoughts on my personal ranking list. But yes, with that, friends, I will say thank you so much for watching. Stay magical, and until next week, I'll see you all real soon.